what? But fortunately, on December 12th, 1970... Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For today's mukbang, I have chili cheese fries, and I know that I have said before in the past that I am not a fan of chili cheese. However, I had, in my most recent burger video, I had a chili cheeseburger, and I actually really liked it, so I thought I should persevere in trying new things. So I have some chili cheese fries here. Also for today's mukbang, I'm going to be talking about a true crime. That's why I only have one food item today. Typically I like to have sweet and savory, but I thought it'd be easier to have one food item while talking about the true crime story because it's gonna be a long one. I tried to narrow it down and make it as short as possible, but it's really hard because there's just so much key information in there. And I've also kind of been putting this one off because it is pretty gruesome, but it was requested and I don't want to neglect your guys's requests, so I tried to get as many done as possible. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling. I guess I should give you a disclaimer. There will be many adult things such as sexual assault, murder, and even a little bit of necrophilia, so if you're sensitive, please click off or put this video on mute because I want you to take care of yourself. This is a very gruesome, heavy one, so brace yourselves. So let's just get started. I'm so excited. So I have vegan fries, Amy's vegan chili, and then I made a vegan cheese sauce. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Yes. All right. Those are good. Wow. They're a lot better than I was expecting. I was a little bit nervous, but they're good. So John Wayne Gacy was named after John Wayne, the famous Hollywood actor. He, as you may know him, the man who dressed up as clowns to entertain children and so forth. Yeah, that guy. He was born on March 17th, 1942 to his father, John Stanley Gacy, and his mom, Marion Elaine Robinson. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. And then he had two sisters, one older, one younger. His dad was very abusive to the family. He was an alcoholic, but it seems he would kind of hone in on John Gacy, his son, and abuse him the most. I don't know if that's because John was his son, his only son. I don't know, but very sad nonetheless. So John was a little overweight due to a heart condition that he had, which inhibited him from engaging athletically or being athletic. So this prevented him from playing sports with all the other boys his age. And in 4th grade, he started suffering from blackouts, which would hospitalize him. And then he was also later hospitalized due to a burst appendix. All in all, between the ages of 14 to 18, Gacy was in the hospital in total 1 year. So accumulating all of the times he was at the hospital. It was about 1 year. And this led to poor grades in school because he was missing so much. And then his father openly accused John, his son, of faking these conditions for sympathy or for attention. And John was still in his hospital bed while his dad was accusing him of this. So like I said, his dad pretty much seemed to target him, and a lot of the time it was mostly physical abuse. For example, there was one time that John accidentally messed up some of his dad's car engine parts, which then led his dad to beat him with a leather belt. And if John's mom tried to step in or intervene, then John's dad would proceed to call him a sissy or a mommy's boy, and that he was going to grow up queer. And poor John was exposed to sexual stuff at a very young age. He was touched when he was 5 by an older woman, and when he was like 6 or 7, he was found touching another young girl with another boy, and his dad found out and beat him up. And later that same year, a family friend ended up molesting him at the age of 8. So John just really had a really hard upbringing. So by the time that John turned 18, he started involving himself in his community, which for some reason his father didn't approve of and called him a pansy. So then John ended up dropping out of high school his senior year and then moved to Las Vegas. He ended up getting hired at a funeral parlor, but he did not have anywhere to live. So the owner said that John could sleep there on a cot in the embalming room, which then John would end up climbing into some of the coffins and would proceed to cuddle up with the bodies. Now at this point, John ended up realizing what he was doing, and so he decided he wanted to go back home. So after 3 months of living in Las Vegas, he ended up moving back to Chicago and then attended business college and then graduated in 1963, which he then ended up moving to Springfield, Illinois, because his job took him there. He was a salesman for a shoe company. He there joined a non-profit leadership training organization called the JC Organization, where he then became the vice president in 1965. And there he met and started dating Marilyn Myers. And they eventually ended up getting engaged and then married, I think 6 months later. And at some point before the marriage, John ended up cheating on Marilyn with one of the other JC members, but Marilyn, being the amazing woman she is, decided to work through it and proceed with the marriage. So as I said, they got married and they ended up moving to Waterloo, which is also in Illinois, for a job offer for John to work at KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. In February of 1966, Marilyn gave birth to a little baby boy and then a baby girl in March of 1967, which is the best year for Chevy's Impala, in my opinion. So John was working hard. Everybody around him seemed to admire and respect him. He had a lot going for him. And then in 1966, John's parents decided to visit. And at this point, John's father actually apologized, and he even admitted that he was wrong about John and shook his hand, which was pretty paramount to John. I mean, his dad finally gave him validation, something he thought he was never going to get. John also continued to work for the JC organization at the Waterloo location, where things really weren't so good. He and other members of the JC organization were steadily involved in drugs, and porn, and even wife swapping. What even is that? I mean, I know what it is, but John even opened up a club in the basement of his house where JC members would come and hang out, and he would even invite some of his KFC co-workers, many of which were young teenagers, whom John would offer alcohol and try to make sexual advances to. And thank goodness none of them were successful, and every time one of the boys would say like, "No, what are you doing?" John would pretend it was a joke, and he'd be like, "Oh, just kidding." So John started taking a turn. My goodness, it won't stay on my fork. And if you guys thought that it was bad, in August of 1967, that's where things really started to take a turn. John started inviting a few teens to his house, which he would pay $50 to participate in what he called a homosexual experiment for scientific research. And these boys didn't know any better. They saw an opportunity to get money and they went for it, especially because John seemed to be a well-respected man whom they trusted. But Donald, one of the boys, ended up going to his father and telling his father about what had happened, which made his father furious, rightly so. So they immediately went to the police and they ended up charging John for oral sodomy. And John then refused these allegations for fear of losing his positively regarded public image. So to prove his innocence, he asked for a polygraph, to which the police obliged. Now John was actually nervous to take the polygraph test because I'm assuming he didn't expect the police to agree, but they did. And so they asked him if he had sex with the boy, Donald, and John said no. Well, the polygraph revealed that that was a lie. So on May 10th, 1968, John was indicted on the sodomy charges. Now John was determined to prevent Donald from testifying because he believes that would put an end to everything somehow. So on August 30th, John hired one of his KFC members or co-workers to scare Donald out of testifying, aka beating him up. Luckily, when approached by the employee, Donald was able to escape, and this same employee ended up betraying John later on and disclosed that John had hired him. So this led to John's second arrest, where he was charged for trying to intimidate a witness. This Amy's chili is like one of the only chilies that I will really eat and just eat out of pure enjoyment, because there are some chilies I just can't handle, but this one I would go to the store and get a can and just eat it. It's so good. And that's just water, by the way. So eventually, John pled guilty on the charges of sodomy, but he flipped the story. He said that Donald was the one who came onto him. And thank goodness nobody actually believed this, because it wasn't true. So, John was convicted on December 3rd and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. And that very same day, Marilyn, his wife, ended up filing for a divorce, which she won, and also gained custody of their 2 children, which he never saw again. Now, due to John's determination and his drive, he ends up making his way to the top in the prison. He became head cook. He even tried to improve some of the prison conditions. And just after 18 months, he was granted parole and given a 1-year probation period. He then moved back to Chicago and ended up getting a job at a restaurant as a cook. Well, less than a year goes by and John was charged once again for sexually assaulting a teenage boy on more than one occasion. However, miraculously, charges were dropped. John probably talked his way out of it with his charm. John ends up moving into a place with his mom in Cook County, Chicago. He still worked as a cook, but he also ended up getting a job working at a construction company where he would sign contracts in the evening. And he eventually quits his job as a cook once his construction business started flourishing, and ended up developing into an interior design remodeling type of situation. And once again, John delved into his community. He built up his public image. It was even said that he held barbecues that over 600 people attended. Apparently he knew how to throw a good party. I'm not going. You can count me out. I'll just stay here with my chili cheese fries. And at this point in time, this is when John got introduced to Jolly Joker Clown Club, where they would volunteer at parades, children's hospitals, and dress up as, you guessed it, clowns. And in his time volunteering, John made up 2 different clown characters. Pogo the Clown, which was his more fun clown, and Patches the Clown, which was more serious. So John would decide which one he dressed up as based on how he was feeling. Fast forward to July 1st of 1972, John gets married to one of his ex-girlfriends. Her name was Carol, and she already had 2 daughters. And here's where the story really takes a turn, so brace yourselves. About 3 years later, John admits to Carol that he is bisexual. Now, Carol, a little confused, decides that she wants to stay with John, but at this point in time, their marriage starts to dwindle. Carol ended up finding some gay porn in John's belongings along with some men's wallets. John would work late nights, and when he got home, he wouldn't even acknowledge Carol's existence, pretty much. He'd go straight to his garage where he was hanging out with all of the boys, all his co-workers, the ones who worked at KFC, and he pretty much always had a posse of young boys around him. Carol and John would just argue and fight all the time, so Carol asked for a divorce, which John agreed. Now, John's construction business was known for hiring young men because, you know, they're young and fit and they'll get the job done, but John would try to attempt to have sexual associations with some of the boys. He would incentivize them by telling them that he would give them a promotion, and if they didn't oblige, he would threaten to kill them. So they don't really have much of a choice, do they? In 1976, John ends up picking up a young hitchhiker whose name is David. I'm pretty sure he was only 18 years old, which he then soon discovers that David has no place to stay, and because Carol and her daughters moved out, he had extra space, so he offers David a place to stay, and he ends up even offering him a job at his construction company. And David agrees. So I think it was that very night, it was David's birthday, so John dressed up in his Pogo the Clown outfit to celebrate. And they were already drinking, and then John attempts to assault David, but David ended up like rejecting him in some way, and then John just played it off as some joke, like he was just joking. He likes to joke a lot, apparently. David ended up moving out, but John even tried a second time to assault him, which was a fail. David also continued working for the construction company, which wasn't a good idea, but he just stayed away from John. So, bleh. One thing I forgot to mention is that before David left, John said, quote, "You're not any fun. You're not any fun." Now, after this incident, John decides he wants to up the ante, meaning he wants to go a little further than assault. So not only would he assault these young boys, but he would go as far as to torture them before strangling them with a rope. So now he's murdering. So I'm not going to go into detail because I'm eating, but also I just don't want to, and a lot of you guys are sensitive, and I just don't want to. So I'm not going to go into detail about everything, but after killing his victims, he would sometimes keep them under his bed before moving them to the crawl space underneath his house. He would attempt to embalm some of his victims as well. And at some point, I don't know how, but John managed to get his hands on a police badge and a police siren to go on his car, or a police siren light to trick people that he was a police officer. Now, many people have questioned why the police hadn't taken note of any of these missing boys, but it could have been that these boys were runaways and their disappearance just went unnoticed. And some even say that the police didn't want to get involved because John was bisexual and they didn't want to deal with that. Okay, so I can't even believe this next part, but here we go. On January 2nd, 1972, John is out for a drive and he sees this young boy. So this boy, his name was Timothy, he was 16 years old and he was all alone at a bus station. It was late at night, so John offered Timothy a place to stay and Timothy thought it was fine. So he went with John. Now the next morning, John awoke to Timothy standing in his doorway holding a knife. Without saying anything, I think John started to slowly approach Timothy and Timothy flinched a little bit and that freaked John out, so John attacked him out of defense. At least that's what he says. So he ends up killing Timothy. Then he proceeded to go to the kitchen and saw that there were some uncooked eggs and uncooked food in the kitchen and the table had been set. And then he realized Timothy was just coming to my room probably asking me how I want my eggs done. Poor Timothy. So John ended up dragging Timothy's body to the crawl space underneath his house. And this was all according to John, so goodness knows how accurate this all is. So John, being the sick man that he is, later testified that this satisfied his sexual desires. And he said that this made him realize that killing was the ultimate thrill for him. So because this satisfied his sexual desires, he didn't end up killing for another 2 years. One of John's victims of sexual assault, his name was Jeff, and he ended up seeing John's car because he didn't remember what John looked like, but he saw his car, knew what his car looked like, and saw his license plate and wrote them down and gave the license plate to the police, which he then ended up filing a civil lawsuit against John, claiming that John offered him weed and then sexually assaulted him. Nevertheless, John was only charged with a misdemeanor, where he only had to pay $3,000. Are you kidding me? I'm so done. So, at this point in time, John's crawl space was full. He couldn't fit any more bodies underneath his crawl space. So as an alternative, he started dumping them into the local river, and supposedly he did this 5 times. Now, a young boy named Robert went missing, and he was working at a pharmacy that John's construction company actually helped build. Now this led to the lieutenant bringing John in and questioning him and eventually actually going to his house and looking around while holding him at the station. Now they didn't find any evidence to Robert's disappearance, but they did find the gay porn, they found handcuffs, rope, and a few other things that were pretty suspicious to the lieutenant. They ended up seizing some of these things for testing, but they couldn't find any evidence on Robert, so once again, John was released. Sorry, my camera stopped recording because this video is so long. I'm so sorry. So one day later, one of the items that was seized was a class ring. It came back positive for a boy who had been missing for 2 years. And one of John's employees who had been questioned revealed that a lot of the other employees or young boys that worked for John had also gone missing without a trace. John ended up getting a lawyer who ended up suing the city and the police department for $750,000, claiming that the department was harassing John and doing illegal searches. But fortunately, on December 21st, 1978, the police followed John to a gas station where he was arrested for the possession of weed. They brought him in for questioning, and the very next day, December 22nd, he confessed to burying 27 bodies around his property and throwing some into the river. The police only recovered 4 bodies from the river, and they actually never ended up finding Robert or any evidence of Robert anywhere, which John did throw Robert's body into the river. But after searching his house, the police ended up finding 29 bodies, which 26 of them were found in his crawl space alone. Okay, sorry guys if the setup looks different. I had to charge my camera for a little bit because this video, like I said, is taking forever, so I'm really sorry, but we're almost done. So, on February 6th of 1980, John is charged with 33 counts of murder. The trial lasted about 5 weeks, but it only took the jury less than 2 hours to find him guilty of the murders. John was then sentenced to serve 12 death sentences and 21 life sentences before being sentenced to death on March 13th of 1980. But he ended up sitting on death row for almost 14 years. And on May 11th, 1994, just after midnight, at 52 years old, John was given a lethal injection and died at 12:58 a.m. The end. Good riddance. Honestly, sometimes I feel like these people just deserve to sit in prison and rot rather than given a death sentence, you know? I don't know. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I didn't. I'm just kidding, I did. And these were surprisingly so much better than I expected. I'm thoroughly impressed. I think if I had any other chili, it wouldn't have been as good. But Amy's saved the day. Sorry if it looks different again. My battery cut out again. I just wanted to take a few more bites. Or my battery cut me off because it died. So I just want to take a few more bites real quick. I am really full, but these are so good. Okay, last bite. Alright you guys, that is the end of this mukbang. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed the topic. If you want to see more true crime, let me know. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you want to see more like this, and don't forget to subscribe. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye guys!